She spent 5 months hiding a secret that could destroy her or protect her. She was pregnant, broke, alone, and the baby's father ran half the city through fear. She thought disappearing was the only way to keep her child safe. She was wrong, because some men do not stop looking. This channel exists for stories that go deeper than drama. Stories about mafia bosses who choose love over power, about ordinary people who find extraordinary strength, and about families built on the ruins of broken pasts. The lesson this story carries, running from the truth, only delays the moment you have to face it. And sometimes, what you feared most becomes what saves you. Like this video, share it with a friend, leave your city below, and subscribe. It was to bite, because the next story is already waiting for you.
At 23, Natalie knew survival in New York meant staying invisible. Her degree was collecting dust while she worked as a server. Tonight, her boss Marcus pointed to the VIP section. It was an order, not a request. The event was for men who lived in a different universe, one of extreme wealth and power. She expertly moved through the crowd, feeling every scuff on her cheap shoes. In a city of 8 million people, being unseen was her only asset. Then she saw table 12. It was surrounded by men who looked like professional killers. In the center sat their king. He had dark hair, sharp features, and the coldest amber eyes she had ever seen. He was younger than she expected, but carried himself with immense authority. When he looked at her, the entire room seemed to fade away. "Your drinks," Natalie said, trying to keep her voice steady. She placed the glasses on the table with precision. "Can I get you anything else?" His voice was low and smooth. "Your name." Every man at the table went silent. "Natalie." He tested the name on his tongue. "I'm Adrian." She knew she should leave, but something about him made it impossible. "Tell me, what does someone like you dream about?" The question was so unexpected it left her speechless. "I dream about my shift ending," she said lightly. His mouth curved into a slight smile. "Liar." The word was not an insult. It was an invitation. As she walked away, his voice followed her. "I will see you again, Natalie." It was a declaration. For the rest of the night, she felt his gaze on her. It should have been unsettling, but instead she felt seen. Hours later, her manager told her the VIP wanted a word. A strange mix of fear and curiosity propelled her into a private elevator, taking her to the top floor. The doors opened to a penthouse that overlooked all of Manhattan. Adrian was there, holding 2 glasses. "You came," he said. "You're afraid of me." It was not a question. "Should I be?" she asked. "Probably," he answered with startling honesty. "I wanted to know you," he said. He then listed every detail of her life, her jobs, her online degree, the money she sent home each month. He knew everything, and she had no idea how. "That is invasive," she whispered, her hands trembling. "I know," Adrian admitted. "I needed to know you were real." He explained that in his world, everyone wants something, usually power or revenge. "But you looked at me like I was just another man." "You are," she said. "No, Natalie, I'm really not." The words settled between them. "Then who are you?" she asked. He was someone who made problems disappear, a man who built an empire on loyalty and blood. "For the first time in a decade," he said, "I saw something I wanted more than power." She should have run. Instead, she heard herself say, "One drink." One drink slowly became 2. Their conversation touched on things she never expected. He saw her hunger for real connection. Natalie felt he was dangerous, but not to her. When he asked her to stay, she could not refuse. Morning arrived with instant regret. She had slept with a powerful, mysterious stranger. Natalie escaped before he could stop her. Her phone had 6 missed calls from her friend, Marcus, with an urgent message. Marcus explained the terrifying truth. Adrian was the head of the Caruso crime family. He was not just connected to the Mafia, he ran it. Promise me you will stay away from him, Marcus begged. Weeks later, she was plagued by exhaustion and nausea. When her period was 2 weeks late, she took a test. The two pink lines confirmed it. She was pregnant with a Mafia boss's baby. Her only plan was to disappear completely. She found a fourth-floor walk-up in Queens, changed her number, and quit her job. This child was hers to protect, and she would raise this baby alone. The conversation with Marcus was one she had been avoiding. "You're leaving?" he asked, looking truly upset. Natalie had to lie, claiming she just needed a change. The truth was far more dangerous. She was pregnant, alone, and on the run from the baby's father, a man named Adrian Caruso. She had built a fortress of solitude to protect her unborn child, cutting off everyone. Her life became a grueling routine of 2 jobs, secret doctor visits, and constant anxiety. Juggling an accounting firm and a grocery store, she was barely making enough money to survive, all while the life inside her grew. Some nights, she wondered what might have been if Adrian were just a normal guy. But he was a criminal, and she carried his child, two facts that could never coexist peacefully. Survival was her only goal. Soon, her pregnancy was impossible to hide. Her office co-workers just whispered, but her grocery store manager, Rita, was direct. "You got family? Support?" Rita asked gently. Natalie admitted she was on her own. The father was not in the picture. Rita's simple offer of help felt like the first kindness she had received in months. That kindness kept her going, until the eviction notice showed up. The building had been sold. All tenants had 60 days to get out. No exceptions. A wave of pure panic washed over her. She spent night after night searching for new apartments, but she had no money for deposits and a background she had to keep hidden. Her search was hopeless. One night, crying on her cold bathroom floor, she felt the baby kick. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered to the tiny life she was so desperate to protect. The next 4 weeks were a masterclass in desperation. Natalie worked every shift she could and skipped most of her meals to save every penny. She was rejected by 14 different landlords. They saw a pregnant single woman and saw only liability. To save money on the subway, she started walking the 4 miles to her office job. Her body began to give out. She was always dizzy, with dark circles under her eyes. Rita finally confronted her. "You have to eat," she said sharply. "That baby you are carrying deserves better." The words hit Natalie with the force of a physical blow because they were true. And then her vision went black. She woke up on the break room floor with Rita leaning over her. Ignoring Natalie's protests about the cost, Rita drove her to a nearby clinic. The diagnosis was grim: severe dehydration and anemia. The doctor gave her supplements, but Natalie knew that pills could not solve her real problems. On the drive home, Rita saw the for sale sign. "I have a cousin in Brooklyn," she said suddenly. "She rents cheap rooms." For the first time in months, a wave of relief washed over Natalie, and she began to cry. But the hope was gone as quickly as it came. The cousin's room had already been rented. With only 2 weeks until her eviction, Natalie finally broke. Working late at the empty office, the weight of it all became too much. She hid in a bathroom stall, her body shaking with sobs. She pressed a hand to her belly as the baby kicked. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm trying." She never heard the door open. She only knew she was not alone when a shadow fell across the stall, and a voice from her worst nightmares spoke her name. "Natalie." His voice was firm. "Please go away." She had been hiding for 6 months, but he had found her. With trembling hands, Natalie opened the door. Adrian Caruso, the most dangerous man in the city, stared at her pregnant stomach in disbelief. "Is it mine?" he asked. She could only whisper, "Yes." She finally stood, weak from hunger and fear. "You make problems disappear." I was terrified. He noticed how thin she was. "When did you last eat?" He was angry she was starving while carrying his child. She explained she could barely afford rent, let alone doctor visits. "Women involved with men like you disappear," she said, her voice shaking. Their children are used against them. Adrian moved closer. Those women were not carrying my child. I would never let anyone harm you or our baby. He insisted she come with him, as she was being evicted in 2 weeks. I need to protect us, he said gently. Let me help you just for a little while. Natalie agreed, but only if she had conditions. She would not be his prisoner and could leave when she wanted. Most importantly, he could never try to take the baby. I would never do that to you, he vowed. The car ride was a silent, exhausted blur. They arrived at a stunning penthouse apartment in Tribeca. Adrian led her to a guest room larger than her old apartment. He returned with soup and toast. Eat, he said softly. You need to take care of yourself. Why did you really run? He asked. She explained that the man she spent one night with felt real, but his reputation was a fantasy she could not live with. I protect people, he clarified. The world is not clean. I operate with rules, no drugs, and no harming innocents. Natalie watched him, a gentle man who admitted he was a killer. She should have been terrified, but instead, a strange safety washed over her. He promised they would talk in the morning. Alone in his lavish world, she did not feel fear. For the first time in months, she truly slept. The next day, he cooked her a real breakfast. Adrian had already scheduled a doctor and called her job, handling everything with his usual efficiency. She bristled at the control, but his apology was genuine. He was simply used to solving problems, and she was one he meant to solve. Her old apartment seemed even more depressing in the daylight. Adrian could not hide his disgust at the dangerous conditions she had been living in. He quietly arranged for movers to pack her few belongings, his silence speaking volumes about the life she was leaving behind. She told him everything about the past 6 months of hunger and fear. In return, he made a solemn promise of protection. He explained that his enemies knew a simple rule: anyone who touched his family would face a guaranteed and very painful end. She started to believe him. At the doctor's office, everything shifted. They saw their baby on the ultrasound screen. A perfect, tiny miracle. And then came the news. It was a boy. Natalie watched this powerful, dangerous man weep silently. In that moment, her last wall of defense simply crumbled. During lunch, he asked what she truly wanted from him. She confessed a desire to be seen for who she was, not just as the mother of his child. He admitted she was everything he should run from, but also everything he wanted. She finally understood she was safe. Adrian promised a safe world for me, a life separate from his danger. He said I could have stability and a chance to build my own life. He asked for nothing in return, saying that as the mother of his child, I deserved everything. When I hesitated, wondering if I could ask for him, he knew my thoughts. He said I could have him too, on my terms. That night wasn't just physical for him. He confessed that I made him want to be a better man, and when I disappeared, he feared he had lost that chance. He reached for my hand, admitting he had failed me. He said I ran because he was the monster I feared, and it was his fault. His voice was raw as he asked for a chance to prove he could be the man our son needed. I laced my fingers through his, admitting I was scared. He confessed he was terrified of failing me again, of our son growing up without a father. He was afraid of loving me only to have me leave. We agreed to be terrified together. It was not a promise, but it was honest, and that was enough for now. The following weeks found a strange rhythm. I lived in his guest room, and he respectfully kept his distance while rearranging his life around me. I saw hints of his dangerous work, like the night I found him with bloody knuckles, his eyes full of exhaustion. He just said, "Don't ask," so I did not. He helped me re-enroll in online classes and even hired a tutor for me. He said our son deserved a mother who achieved her dreams. These quiet, thoughtful gestures slowly broke down my defenses. I was falling for this complicated, dangerous, and gentle man. During dinner one night, a phone call changed everything. His voice became sharp and commanding from behind his office door. When he came out, his face was like stone. He told me someone had made a move against his operations. He had reminded them why that was a terrible idea. I asked if he had hurt them. He said no, but he had made his point. He admitted people would try to use me and our son as leverage against him. He turned to me, his voice cold. And every single one of them knows that touching you means death. The brutality of his words should have scared me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of safety. I told him I trusted him to protect us. That night, I realized I was done running. Being with him meant accepting who I was, someone brave enough to love a monster and strong enough to build a family in his world. 3 weeks later, leaving a doctor's appointment, after seeing our son on an ultrasound, our peace was broken. Adrian's expression went from warm to predatory. He had spotted a black sedan parked just outside. "Get in the car now," he said, his voice low and urgent. He guided me to his town car, telling his driver, Marcus, to take me straight home. He promised I was safe, but that he needed to handle something. Before the door closed, I saw him turn toward the black sedan. 2 large, dangerous-looking men got out to meet him. Marcus pulled away as I watched them disappear from view, my heart pounding. It took 2 agonizing hours for Adrian to finally walk through the door of the penthouse. He found her anyway, his knuckles bloody. A rival family tried to use her as a warning. Adrian told her he had made it very clear that she and their son were permanently off limits. She believed him, but fear lingered. The Vulovs were watching, and she knew it. Adrian found her after a nightmare and promised more security. He confessed he could not lose her or their baby. Natalie asked him to stop protecting her from the truth. He explained the world he lived in. The Vulovs were new rivals who did not respect the rules. He called her and their unborn son his only weakness. Since they threatened her, he had to eliminate them completely. It was time for war. Natalie did not want a war fought over her. He said she was the reason he was finally doing what was necessary. Adrian asked her to trust him. She agreed, but asked him to leave the violence behind for their son when it was over. He promised to start a legitimate business for their son. After they confessed their love, war began. The penthouse became a fortress, and he was always gone. One night at 3 a.m, she asked, "How bad is it?" He simply said, "We're winning." "We have lost no one that matters," he said, looking all of his 33 years. He made her promise to flee with their son if he were killed. "I have too much to live for now," he swore, holding her close as she promised. He vowed to take her away somewhere warm and safe when it ended. Then, 2 weeks later, Adrian returned triumphant. "It's over," he announced. "Viktor Vulov surrendered." Relief washed over Natalie, followed by a cold dread. "What did you do?" she asked. "I took his brother Dmitri," Adrian admitted. "He used the man as leverage to end the war without more killing." "I won't apologize for protecting you," he stated. She saw then how different their worlds truly were, and it frightened her. "You make me want to be better," he told her, his voice rough with emotion. He swore to teach their son to build, not destroy. His vulnerable promise melted her fear. "I love you," she whispered, finally accepting their complicated future together. Their peace lasted for 5 days. A stern man named Antonio Marches interrupted them. "The commission is not pleased with how you handled the Vulov situation," he said coldly. "They demand a meeting. You will attend." The man's smile was cold. "You must be why Caruso started a war." I told him, "I am the mother of his child. That is all." Marches turned to Adrian. "Tomorrow night, the usual place." After he left, the room felt heavy. Natalie asked what that was about. "Politics," Adrian explained. "The commission is angry I moved against the Vulovs without asking." Natalie insisted on going with him. "I am tired of being protected from your world," she said. "If we are a family, I need to see everything." Adrian looked at her, torn between his duty to protect her and knowing she was right. He finally agreed, but with strict rules. "Stay close and do not speak." The meeting took place in a closed restaurant, and the tension was immediate. Natalie walked in on Adrian's arm, aware of every stare. She wore a simple, elegant dress, wanting to look strong. The commission was 5 older men who sat like judges at a long table. Antonio Marches gestured for them to sit. Another man immediately accused Adrienne. You started a war with the Vulovs without our approval. Adrienne's voice was calm. The Vulovs threatened my family. That comes before any protocol. Marches leaned in. Or was it an excuse to remove a competitor? Adrienne argued the Vulovs were a growing danger to them all. I took care of a problem, he stated. The men exchanged looks, their silent conversation impossible to read. The heavy man announced the commission's decision. A fine of $5 million, and you will give up the Brooklyn ports. Adrienne's voice turned to ice. Absolutely not. The ports are mine. He stood, his anger clear. I acted to protect my family. If the commission punishes that, then maybe it has the wrong priorities. The air in the room grew colder. Natalie felt her heart pound. I will pay the fine, Adrienne declared. But the ports remain mine. If you cannot accept that, then consider me outside of your authority. The threat was a gamble, a declaration of war, or a stroke of genius. Marches finally gave a cold smile. The ports can stay yours for now, but you have no more favors here. Next time there will be severe consequences. In the car, Adrian confessed his fear. That was a mistake. I just made us a target for every other family. He explained that the ports funded their security, keeping her safe. Without them, we are weak, and weakness gets you killed. Natalie took his hand. Then we will face what comes together. I chose you. She squeezed his hand, urging him to stop blaming himself. You promised to build something better, she said. Start now. Show them you are leaving this life behind. He pulled her close, his voice thick with emotion. You are right. We will do this your way. I will start the transition tonight. We will build something our son can be proud of. The change began the next morning. Adrian was already in his office, speaking Italian on the phone. He was buying a legitimate shipping company, moving fast to create a new life for them. Natalie found him surrounded by paperwork. He motioned for her to sit, finishing his call. I need it done in 6 months, he said into the phone. Make it work. After he hung up, he rubbed his tired eyes. He was purchasing a clean, publicly traded company. It was a massive, complicated step toward a different future. The next few weeks were spent preparing for their new life and their new baby, turning a spare room into a nursery filled with hope. Adrian was getting out of the game. He showed her the papers for his new legitimate businesses. He explained this was the only way to build something they could not take away. He confessed he was scared of becoming a father because his own was a monster. He finally told her everything. His father was a violent man, so he killed him at 21 and took his empire. He feared becoming that monster. Natalie promised him he was nothing like that man. Bad fathers, she said, never worry about being bad fathers. Their quiet moment was shattered by a phone call. His security chief, Marcus, was waiting in the kitchen. He revealed a professional was tracking Natalie's every move. Marcus warned her that Adrienne would demand a complete lockdown to keep her and the baby safe. Adrienne wanted her locked in the penthouse for her own protection. Natalie refused, feeling like a prisoner. He pleaded, his fear for her life raw and real. Finally, she agreed, but gave him a deadline. He had 2 weeks to find the threat. He promised he would handle it in 2 weeks. The doctor came to them, confirming the baby was healthy and due in about 3 weeks. Later, Natalie found Adrian alone in the nursery. He was just staring at the crib they had built together. In the nursery, Adrian's voice was low. I found him, the man who was watching you. Natalie froze. His name is Thomas Garrett, a private investigator. Adrian paused, his jaw tight. He was hired by Antonio Marches. The name was like a bomb exploding in the quiet room. Marches wants to see if you are a weakness, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. He is testing me, looking for leverage to control me. Natalie asked what he would do. I am going to make it clear, Adrian said, turning to her, that you and our son are off limits, that even thinking about using you is a death sentence. Adrian explained he would ruin Marquez, not kill him. His plan would freeze the man's assets and alert the authorities. This action would serve as a warning. He told Natalie they would escape to a safe house in the Hamptons until the baby came. The next day, they drove to a beautiful house in the Hamptons. It was a modern fortress with guards and equipment. Adrian held her, speaking of their future with their son. In that moment, Natalie felt completely safe and ready for what came next. Their quiet week of stolen moments was a beautiful illusion. They cherished the peaceful sunrises and evening walks, but that fragile normal was built on borrowed time. A single phone call was all it took to shatter it. Adrian's face turned to stone as he listened. He hung up, his voice deadly quiet. They hit the penthouse. It was a message. He told her they were connected to the Marquez situation and that she was not safe. He was moving her to a secure room immediately, his voice tight with a fear she had never heard before. There would be no arguments. The basement safe room felt like a cage. "I have to go to the city and handle this," Adrian said, his promise to return before nightfall feeling hollow. He kissed her, a desperate and hurried thing, and then he was gone. Natalie was left alone with her thoughts and the silent guards. Hours crawled by. The lead guard, Marcus, offered only vague updates that did little to calm her nerves. As darkness fell with no sign of Adrian, Natalie's anxiety sharpened into pure dread. Then, a secure phone rang, and the look on Marcus's face told her everything had gone wrong. "Mr. Caruso has been delayed," Marcus stated, his voice carefully neutral. Natalie demanded to know more. "There was a confrontation," he admitted. "The enemy was not who they had expected. It was someone new." Midnight came and went. Then 1, then 2 in the morning. At 3:30, the heavy door finally opened. Adrian stumbled in, looking like he had been through a war. His shirt was torn, there was blood on his hands, and a deep cut over his eye. "I found him," Adrian said, his voice empty. He sank onto the couch, completely exhausted. "It was my father's cousin. He spent the last 12 years believing a lie I created, and he came for revenge." Adrian's hands trembled. "I had to kill him. He gave me no choice." Tears tracked through the grime on his face. "What if I am just like my father? What if our son sees me as a monster?" Natalie took his bloody hands in hers. "No," she whispered. "You are not him. You want to break the cycle. That makes you a good man." He finally looked at her. "It's over. The vendetta is finished. We're safe now." They left the bunker and walked to the beach to watch the sunrise, a symbol of their new, safer life. Adrian held her close, a real smile finally reaching his eyes. As the sky turned pink, Natalie felt a surge of hope. Then, she gasped. A sudden warmth rushed down her legs, soaking the sand beneath them. She looked at Adrian, her voice tight with panic. "I think my water just broke." The peaceful dawn erupted into controlled chaos. Their war was over, but their son was ready for his own battle to begin. It was supposed to be 10 more minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Dr. Chen met them with a team, and after a painful blur, Adrienne's voice was her anchor. With one final push and a piercing cry, their son was born. He was perfect, with dark hair like his father. As Natalie held him, tears of joy streamed down her face. Adrian wept openly, his hand resting gently on their baby's head. Their perfect moment shattered when the door flew open. Marcus and Adrian instantly became human shields. A security guard entered, hands raised. He spoke quickly. "Mr. Caruso, there's a problem. Multiple people are in the lobby demanding to see the baby." Adrian's joy turned to ice. He told the doctor they had to leave immediately. Understanding the danger, Dr. Chen arranged a swift discharge with a nurse escort, but demanded they return in 48 hours. The next 20 minutes were a whirlwind of focused activity. Doctors checked on Natalie and her newborn son, but downstairs, trouble was waiting. Adrian's voice was like ice. Marcus showed them camera footage of Antonio Marquez and his men. Adrian knew they had to face them directly. He asked Natalie, who had just given birth, to confront them. She looked at her son and found a strength she never knew. She agreed to protect him. In the lobby, Marchus claimed Adrian had kidnapped her. Adrian simply gave Natalie the chance to speak for herself. Natalie's voice was firm. She said she was there by her own choice. She threatened Marchus with harassment charges and the media. Adrian told Marchus he had crossed a line by involving his family. The cold threat worked. Marchus left. Exhausted, Natalie asked to go home. The drive was a blur. She held her son, feeling stronger than ever. In the safety of their home, Adrian promised he would make everything right. She knew he would. A few days later, they fell into a routine. During a 3 a.m. feeding, they finally named their son. He would not carry a family legacy. They chose James Brooks Caruso, a name to connect both of their worlds. Their peace lasted only 6 days. Marcus entered with grim news. The commission was filing a lawsuit. They claimed Natalie was a prisoner. Worse, someone had leaked the story to the press, painting a terrible picture for the world to see. They are trying to corner me, Adrian explained. Marchus was using public pressure to force a negotiation. So what will you do? She asked. He had a plan to prove their family was legitimate. He turned to Natalie, his eyes full of hope. Marry me. The proposal was both shocking and perfect. Natalie's breath caught in her throat. This was his solution. It is not just a solution, he said. It is what I have always wanted. He knelt by her chair, telling her he loved her and their son. He wanted to build a real life with her. He took her hand and asked again. Natalie looked at this man who had completely changed her life. Then she glanced at James, sleeping peacefully in her arms. Yes, she finally said. I will marry you. A brilliant smile lit up his face. Truly? He insisted on a proper wedding, not a rushed one. But we will announce it today, he declared. Within 2 hours, they had a press release. Natalie wrote her own statement. She made it clear she was choosing to marry him. The news spread like wildfire. It became a modern love story. March's lawsuit lost all its power. The narrative of a victim was gone. You won, Natalie told him a week later. We won, Adrian corrected her. You are the one who stood up to them. It has always been my choice. I chose you. They stood together, looking toward their new future. So what happens now? She asked. Now they would get married and raise their son. He promised to keep his word. I am leaving the family business, he told her. He explained it could take 3 to 5 years. There is something else, he added. He was starting a foundation to help children. He wanted to give them opportunities he never had. Tears welled up in Natalie's eyes. It was a beautiful idea. You gave me the idea, he said. Our son deserves a father he can be proud of. He wanted to be a man who helped people. He pulled her close. For the first time, Natalie felt true peace. The path forward would not be easy, but they would face it together. The wedding was planned for 3 months later in a private ceremony at their house in the Hamptons. Natalie's dress was simple, and Adrian looked handsome in a suit. James, their charming son, was held by Marcus. Dr. Chen and a few other close friends were there. Adrian's guest list was very small. The commission sent a gift but did not attend. I, Adrian Caruso, take you, Natalie Brooks, to be my wife, he said. I promise to protect you and honor you. I promise to be the father our son deserves. I will choose you every day for the rest of my life. Natalie's vows were just as meaningful. I choose you. I choose this family. I choose our future together. As they kissed, James made a little noise. Everyone laughed, and the tension finally disappeared. The reception was small and perfect. They danced on the deck as the sun went down. James slept nearby. Natalie's feet were sore, but she was incredibly happy. Happy? Adrian asked her. Terrifyingly so, she replied. I keep expecting a problem. Nothing will go wrong, he assured her. Of course, life was never that simple. They faced challenges over the next year. There were sleepless nights and difficult moments, but there were also moments of pure joy. They saw James's first smile and heard his first laugh. They watched him take his first steps. The foundation launched on their son's first birthday. It provided scholarships and support for kids. Adrian poured all his energy into this new work. He found a new passion for building things up. "I never thought I could do this," he admitted one night. "You were always capable of it," she replied. Natalie sat next to him, their 2-year-old son sleeping nearby. He was once a monster, and she was the woman terrified of him. This is the story of how they built a family from nothing. Adrian looked around their chaotic, beautiful home. "We did this," he said. Natalie agreed, remembering the hard times, the blood on his hands, the threats against their son, James. Every instinct screamed to run, but she stayed. She chose to fight for something better. "I'm glad I did," she whispered. He kissed her head. "You saw the man, not the monster." "You were never a monster," she said, "just someone who did what it took to survive. Now, you do beautiful things to thrive." This was the life she wanted. Not an easy one, but a meaningful one. 5 years later, in her own office, she looked at a photo of Adrian and James. A text from Adrian came in. "Can you get Jamie from school?" She replied, "On my way, dinner at 7. This simple, normal life was once an impossible dream. She had worked 3 jobs just to survive. James was waiting at school, his face lit up when he saw her. "Mom, I got a gold star. We have to celebrate," she said, her heart full. This was what mattered. These small moments they fought so hard for. That night at dinner, Natalie watched her family and felt a wave of gratitude. Adrian noticed. "I was just thinking how far we have come," she said. "From a bathroom floor to here." He smiled, taking her hand. It was the best journey. And she knew the scary parts were what made them who they are. Later, they watched James sleep. Adrian quietly suggested another child, eventually. "Are you asking or telling me?" she teased. "Asking. Always asking." Natalie thought about it. "More chaos, yes, but also more love," she agreed. "In a year or 2, when we are ready. And this time, we will plan for it." He pulled her close. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me a life worth living. For showing me how to build instead of destroy." "You saved me when I was drowning," she replied. "And you protected me." Natalie smiled. "We saved each other." In the quiet of their apartment, they had carved out something precious. A family built on choice and strengthened by hardship. Natalie Brooks Caruso began her journey alone and scared. She was pregnant, hiding from a man she believed would ruin her. But fear turned into courage, hiding turned into fighting, and the monster turned out to be a man who just needed someone to believe in him. Her life now was not safe or simple. It was complicated and challenging, but it was theirs. "Come to bed," Adrian said, pulling her hand. "James will want pancakes at 6 in the morning." "Since when do you make pancakes?" She laughed. "I am learning," he said. "Only 2 smoke alarms this week." She smiled as they walked to their room. Drifting off in his arms, she thought about that terrified girl on the bathroom floor. If she could tell that girl what was coming, would she believe it? Probably not. But Natalie had learned that the best stories are never the easy ones. They are about people who choose to fight for something better. People who turn fear into strength and build a future from the rubble of the past. Stories just like hers. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.